What is load testing? In theory, load testing is a type of performance testing, but in practice, we are kind of interchanging performance testing with load testing in practical scenarios with practical applications. The reason for being is most of our products, most of our companies, if they need performance test, the only thing they need to check, they need to validate is a load test. How much? So let's say 5 testers are trying to access this application and running the functionality. Obviously it's a concurrent usage by 5 different testers, so they're already doing some level of validation of the performance of the system. So if at all we need quick access, hundreds of people trying to access our system thing, what we usually do, we just simulate that area. That let me do it 100 users, let me simulate 100 users accessing our system using a script. Obviously you cannot practically do manual testing on this area. Whoever people says manual testing, they actually says they don't know how to do performance test, or they do performance test but they don't realize they are actually doing automation, because obviously you're using a script. Even if you are using JMeter, even if you are filling in all this information in JMeter, that's a part of automation. JMeter is simulating this automatic script based on the input you are providing. So that is part of the automation as well. Let's come back to manual versus automation later. But thinking about performance test or load test, pretty much you do simulate the concurrent usage of your customers from different applications. The one of the major mistakes most of us when we do load testing is when we do concurrency, we always do it in one way. If you are using browser testing, you do Chrome 100 users at the same time. But in theory, how you supposed to do, or what is the best way to do, or what is the ideal way to do, is try to simulate a real-time action. Not only try 100 users from Chrome, but also try to do multiple browsers, do 2 different mobile applications from 2 different platforms, iOS and Android, try to access your system at the same time, if your system requires it, of course. So that's how you do load testing. So what you are collecting information, pretty much you collect as much as, in practice, we collect as much as information possible. We don't consolidate or stop ourselves or prevent ourselves from collecting one level of information, but you collect as much as information possible. Imagine you are accessing all your APIs. You collect how many endpoints are hit, how many endpoints are actually processing the value as right, and then send back the 200, and you get a unknown 400, 404s, 500s for unexpected reasons you are facing this. This might look slightly weird, that how it will give a 404. I don't know this endpoint, if the endpoint is available and accessible. That's exactly the problem we are trying to identify using load test. At some point when the service, if you are writing an API in Python, JavaScript, Java, Scala, doesn't matter, when you are writing some level of performance test, your service also do its own memory allocation for running the system. Not only your automation code, but the actual service itself storing this information in some memory, sometimes in database. Some information goes to database, some of them in cache, some of them in memory. So you are doing all these when hundreds of people accessing the system. At some point the service cannot allocate enough memory for your request. It will simply throw back an error that 400 database is not processed, 500 unknown error. That kind of errors might happen from API. It not only from API, from the browser side. If the Chrome, it's not going to be like one Chrome with 100 users. It would be 100 different Chrome extensions or Chrome services trying to access this service. At some point Chrome itself have its own memory problem. So that's what you are validating with load testing. So what's your expectations here? It depends on service to service. Some service we have a risk aptitude of like, okay, I can give 1% errors if there is 100 users accessing our system, which is still more like around 1% is like 10 users, 10 errors per 100 requests. That is kind of okay, but still you have to find your risk appetite. It cannot have 10 users trying to do and 2 of them getting errors, right? So you need to figure it out, and you also need to analyze these errors later. Before that, I will explain the basic things. So you collect all these errors, how many requests goes on, how many errors getting, and then each request have a different response time. Your first request, maybe it's because of its warm up, it's a cold start, it might have a hike in response time, and the last in the middle it may be easier. At a point in time after 5 minutes or something, you might be getting a slowness because too many memory allocations are happening in parallel from your service system, which is slowing your system down. So these are all the things you collect. So how do you collect? Most of the services will give you your 99 percentage, 50 percentage, which actually means when 100 users accessing this system, these many requests are happening. At out of 100 requests, how many requests are getting this percentage of errors and this percentage of responses and how much time it took. So these are all the informations. We will be discussing it in some other areas at some point in time. We will be discussing it in detail. How do we test API and mobile and web application in performance? But in short, this is what you will be collecting. You will be collecting the memory utilization, what is the RTT time, round trip response time, and what is your memory utilization, what is your CPU usage, how much spike it happens. These are all the metrics you collect. Some of these things will be explained in the subsequent videos about what is spike testing, volume, and other things. But this is what you need to basically understand. In practice, when you do load test, you try to hit your threshold as much as possible in a short span of time, 5 to 10 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, and collect as much as data possible. So that's understanding your system's cognitive load, how much it can handle. That is the question we are trying to access or answer by collecting or doing load testing and collecting all this data.